Hey everybody, Joe Joseph here for thedailysheeple.com, and this is your news shot. I'm going to go to libertyblitzkrieg.com. Mike Krieger is doing a series now called It's Time to Rethink Education. And first of all, I have to agree with him 100%. It's most certainly time to rethink education. But folks, it's time to rethink education in a way that's outside the box, okay? The current construct has failed us. The current construct was developed well over 100 years ago to not only promote a communist viewpoint, but also to bring about a society that was geared towards manufacturing, geared towards mass production. And so what they wanted was people just smart enough to operate machinery, but dumb enough to question authority. And that's what our current education system breeds. Is that it breeds good automatons of every way, of every level, you know, up to a doctorate. Just because you have a doctorate doesn't mean you're smart. Let's just be crystal clear with that. Because I've met some pretty dumb doctors out there. I'll tell you that right now. It says here, as a father of 2 young children, Mike writes, my thoughts have increasingly started to center around their young lives and the future of world they'll inhabit, or lack thereof. Such considerations quickly lead to stressful questions such as, what are the best schools in the area and which options can be the best environment in which to thrive? If the best options aren't public, can we afford them? Is it worth the money? All these questions and more have filled the minds of his wife, of my wife, and myself over the past couple of years. And for us, we've been doing it now for a long time. But he says, but lately we started to ask even bigger questions such as, whether the compulsory education system as it exists in the U.S. in 2017 makes any sense in the first place. It doesn't. He says, before I get into that, he says, let's take a step back. This has a lot with what he does at Liberty Blitzkrieg and what I do here at Daily Sheeple is highlight what's perverse and destructive about human behavior. We see it all the time, folks. And I try to highlight things that oftentimes will motivate people to bring about solutions, because that's really what we need at the end of the day. And all of this is brought about why? Well, because we get started off on the wrong foot. Because we get started off, think about this. We teach our children from the very earliest ages, first of all, that it's okay to lie. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think that some of the things we do are cute and cuddly, but really, it's the height of naivete to say that Santa Claus provides any positive benefit to you in your life from being a child all the way up to an adult and into your adulthood. It doesn't. There's no value added at all. But what it does do is it teaches our children at a very young age, it's okay to lie. Yeah, Jesus is the reason for the season. It's okay to lie. The Easter Bunny, it's okay to lie. The Tooth Fairy, it's okay to lie. We teach our children these traditions of lies from a very early age and teach them and get them into a habit that instantly sets them off on the wrong foot. Well, education is the exact same way. No two humans are wired the same. Then why do we try to teach our children or force them down the same model, down the same road, in the same cinder block classrooms across America? It doesn't work. And it's reflected in the metrics. Because if you go to the metrics and you look at how the United States stacks up against other countries throughout the world, we've been plummeting since 1953. We've gone from first to 40th in science. 40th? A lot of people say, wow, you know, United States, it's the first country. It's the greatest country in the world. Greatest country on earth. I beg to differ. You look at the statistics, they tell an entirely different story. Take a look at education. We're not the best in the world. We can't even crack the top 20 in any of the statistical measures with regards to education. Freedom Index. We can't even crack the top 10. And here we are saying, wow, we're spreading freedom and democracy throughout the world. And yet, you look at the Heritage Foundation's Freedom Index, we can't even make the top 10. I don't even think, we may not even be in the top 15. You know, it's pretty bad when Malaysia is more free than the United States. But it is. There's a lot of things that we look at and we say we're first and foremost. You know what we're first and foremost in? Infant mortality. Yeah. Infant mortality rate. That's something to be proud of. Here we are, the United States, right? We are the bastion of what everything human should be. But, yeah, education sucks. We're not free. Babies are dying everywhere. I know a lot of people say, oh, come on, Joe, babies aren't dying everywhere. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. Comparatively speaking to other countries in the world, yeah, they are. And I mean, we can be naive about it or we can just cut straight to the point. Stop vaccinating our kids so much and putting all this crap into them. And then you know what happens? They live, surprisingly enough. SIDS falls through the roof when you start scaling back the aggressive vaccine schedule that our children are subjected to. And again, you know, you can be pro-vaccine, you can be against vaccine. I don't care. That's up to you. But it should be your choice. And then you should be given the information to make the best decision possible. Not just, oh, well, we're from the government and we're here to help. And why, you should trust us if we tell you that this vaccination schedule is not only, you know, it's compulsory, and oftentimes it is. If you want to take part in going to the indoctrination centers, unless you want to go through an arduous waiver, they're going to make you do it. Now, there's not to say you can't do a waiver, absolutely, but they're going to make it very hard for you to do that. Education is the same way. Compulsory, right? Everybody has to go and has to do this and has to have this many hours of this and whatever. And each state is different. But one thing is for certain, this compulsory system has done nothing but dumb our population down further and further and further. And it's wrong. And he says, since the worst of humanity will always work hardest and most violently to attain power here, the only way to achieve lasting positive change is to systematically move to a different model for human activity. Trying to get decent people at the top of the highly centralized power structure is counterproductive and merely a short-term solution if it can even be achieved in the first place. So he says what we need to do is tear down and reduce centralized power as much as possible. If power becomes distributed far more widely across the planet, the ability for mass control and consolidation becomes more difficult, if not impossible. And he's right there, too. He says the most significant theme of the next 100 years, at least, will be a dramatic shift towards decentralized networks in nearly all aspects of human affairs. And he says we've already seen a profound impact in a dramatic decentralization of information and media content creation and distribution, and we're starting to see its impact when it comes to currency and monetary systems. Without the arrival and viral adoption of the internet, none of this would have been possible, and he's right. Same thing with homeschooling. Really was possible, but now the door swung wide open because everybody, regardless of income, ethnicity, doesn't matter. If you have access to the internet, and most do, you basically have humanity's knowledge at your fingertips, which is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Now, he says earlier this year, I came across a 1990 speech by famed teacher and author John Taylor Gatto. And he says it totally blew his mind. He says he can't stress enough how important it is to read the entire thing. And you can get this book. Very similar to Charlotte Iserbyt's book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. John Taylor Gatto's book, Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling. And then you can look at the findings of the Reese Committee in the 1950s and the work of Norman Dodd. That was pivotal in exposing the conspiracy that was afoot for well over 60 years when that went down. And still, the results of that investigation were swept under the rug, and all of it buried so that they could maintain this system of control. Now, John Taylor Gatto writes, our school crisis is a reflection of this greater social crisis. He says, we seem to have lost our identity. Children and old people are penned up and locked away from the business of the world to a degree without precedent. Nobody talks to them anymore, and without children and old people mixing in daily life, a community has no future and no past, only a continuous present. In fact, the name community hardly applies to the way we interact with each other. He says we live in networks, not communities, and everyone I know is lonely because of that. And in some strange way, school is a major actor in this tragedy, just as it's a major actor in the widening guilt among social classes. Using school as a sorting mechanism, we appear to be on the way to creating a caste system, complete with untouchables who wander through the subway trains, begging and sleep on the streets. I've noticed a fascinating phenomenon in my 25 years of teaching, that schools and schooling are increasingly irrelevant to the great enterprises of the planet. No one believes anymore that scientists are trained in science classes or politicians in civics classes or poets in English classes. The truth is that schools don't really teach anything except how to obey orders. This is a great mystery to me because thousands of humane, caring people work in schools as teachers and aides and administrators, but the abstract logic of this institution overwhelms their individual contributions. Although teachers do care and do work very hard, the institution is psychopathic. It has no conscience. It rings a bell, and the young man in the middle of writing a poem must close his notebook and move to a different cell where he must memorize that man and monkeys derive from a common ancestor. Our form of compulsory school is an invention of the state of Massachusetts around 1850. It was resisted, sometimes with guns, by an estimated 80% of the Massachusetts population. The last outpost in Barnstable on Cape Cod not surrendering its children until the 1880s, when the area was seized by militia and children marched to school under guard. Here is another curious thing to think about. The homeschooling movement has quietly grown in size, to a size where 1.5 million young people are being educated entirely by their own parents. Last month, the education press reported the amazing news that children schooled at home seem to be 5 or 10 years ahead of their formally trained peers in the ability to think. Now, he says, I don't think we're going to get rid of schools anytime soon, certainly not in my lifetime. But if we're going to change what is rapidly becoming a disaster of ignorance, we need to realize that the school institution schools very well, but it doesn't educate. That's inherent to the design of the thing. It's not the fault of bad teachers or too little money spent. It's just impossible for education and schooling ever to do or be the same thing. Schools were designed by Horace Mann and Bernard Sears and Harper of the University of Chicago and Thorndike of Columbia Teachers College, and some other men to be instruments of the scientific management of mass population. Schools are intended to produce, through the application of formulaic human beings whose behavior can be predicted and controlled, a la your factory worker, your automaton. It says to a very great extent, schools succeed in doing this, but our society is disintegrating. And in such a society, the only successful people are self-reliant, confident individuals. Because the community life which protects the dependent and the weak, my friends, is dead. The products of schooling are, as I've said, irrelevant. Well-schooled people are irrelevant. They can sell film and razor blades, they can push paper, and they can talk on telephones or even sit mindlessly before a flickering computer terminal. But as human beings, they're totally useless. Useless to others and useless to themselves. Note, my friends, what the public school structure does. It does exactly that. It promotes prison culture. Think about your time in school and remember how the smart people were treated. Were they put up on a pedestal? Were they praised for their good work? Or were they vilified? Were they made fun of? Were they talked down to? Called nerds? Called geeks? Right? Because if you didn't ride the wave, you were an outcast. And people who were smart were cast aside. And they didn't have an easy life. They had a hard life. And they still have a hard life today. This is what it promotes. And this is the problem that we have in society, folks. We have a sorely outdated system. We have a system that was never meant to educate your children. It was only meant to teach them habits and slavery. That's it. And what we have now is a nation of slaves and not critical thinkers. Critical thinking is dead. So do your due diligence if you're a parent or a prospective parent in studying all of the avenues to educate your child and have the cojones to do the right thing in the face of government oppression and tyranny. I'm Joe Joseph. This was thedailysheeple.com's News Shot. Feel free to comment below and visit our website at thedailysheeple.com. Hashtag wake the flock up. Have a great day, everybody.